how on earth could he compile 13 guns? How can that happen? You know, I'm not trying to say that that's to blame for what happened, but if Chris had not been able to get a hold of 13 guns, it wouldn't have happened.
That was Ian Mercer, father to Chris Harper Mercer, who went on that shooting rampage at Umpqua Community College in Oregon last Thursday. The distraught father is left wondering if his son wasn't able to obtain his arsenal, could that have prevented his death and the 9 students he took with him? The shooting has once again reignited the gun debate, and that's where we'd like to begin today's roundtable. And joining us live today on Newsmax Now, we have communications strategist and National Media Relations Director at Citizens for Self-Governance, Tamara Colbert. Also with us, radio host and former advisor to Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid, Ari Rabin-Havt. Thank you both for joining us here. Good to have you.
Thank you.
Ari, let's start with you. Mr. Mercer thinks stricter gun laws could have prevented his son from getting a weapon, thereby preventing the shootings at UCC. The opposition, of course, argues we just live in a dangerous world and tighter gun laws just leave the good defenseless, as criminals will still have firearms. How does tightening the gun laws keep guns out of the hands of criminals?
I mean, I was looking at some recent studies from a number of universities and other places, and one that really struck me came from a professor at the University of Arkansas who looked at mass shootings around the world and looked at correlative factors and causal factors that people cite for those mass shootings, from mental health of populations to violent video game usage to other forms of violence in society, and found one singular relationship in the U.S. that leads to more mass shootings, and that is the availability of firearms. Now, I mean, and if you look at his data, this is a plain and simple fact that the availability of firearms correlates to more mass shootings. And, you know, we have to come to some realistic terms on that in this country, and there's got to be a way to do it.
Tamara, Hillary Clinton has come out today with details on a new proposal. Clinton is calling for the repeal of the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act, which basically gives legal protection to gun manufacturers and dealers whose guns are used for criminal activity. A repeal would force the gun industry to make their weapons that are given to people who use them only righteously, effectively bringing down the guns used in criminal actions. Why would this be bad for America?
What's good for America is the Second Amendment. And what we're seeing now coming out of Roseburg, Oregon, is the fact that pastors on Sunday, and even one of the victims' moms, is actually saying that if that wasn't a gun-free zone and the students had the ability to be armed, that this senseless tragedy would have never happened. Hillary is just trying to make political heyday out of a tragedy to elevate herself. But we can see, actually, the Department of Justice 2 years ago put out a study that said out of the top 10 deaths in America, causes for death, guns was actually number 10 on the list. Number 1 was medical mistakes. So actually, President Obama, Hillary Clinton, and whoever else calling for stricter gun laws, it's actually proven that stricter gun laws do not make Americans more safe, but in fact, the Second Amendment and Americans who embrace that are more safe.
So
I'm really glad Tamara's calling for a repeal of malpractice reform.
Absolutely, and it starts with Obamacare being repealed, Ari. Thank you.
But I want to ask you both.
Reform has nothing to do with Obamacare being repealed.
I want to ask you both this, so I want to go back to the gun debate, because this happens every time that there's a shooting in this country. And Ari, is it just unrealistic to think that's ever going to happen? Because how many times have we talked about it?
What's ever going to happen?
There'll be a lot of people that will say, don't people just need to give up that argument? When you hear the president push for more gun control, it happens every time. Nothing's going to change. A lot of Democrats also believe in the Second Amendment, that it's just this continuous argument that we keep having, and nothing's going to change.
The Second Amendment is really clear. There are the words well regulated in there.
But Ari, do you really think gun control is going to happen?
I think a lot of things have happened in this country. I think 10 years ago, George W. Bush was a supporter of the assault weapons ban. I think politics is a shifting environment in this country. I think because one one party, which is actually, if you look at the polling, has moved away from a belief, doesn't mean that belief can never happen, and doesn't mean that advocates for a certain belief should stop pushing for it. I think if there's any lesson that can be taken from the conservative movement, especially people like Barry Goldwater, his beliefs were unpopular in 1964, and I think Ronald Reagan did an excellent job installing those beliefs. Just because beliefs are unpopular at one point or politically untenable at one point doesn't mean that a few years down the road they become politically tenable.
Tamara, last word to you.
Well, CNN just put out a poll over the weekend. 59% of Americans believe that the Second Amendment is gun control enough. 49% of those polled, which makes almost, 85+% of Americans polled believe that the gun laws for our nation are fine right where they are. People kill people.
All right, we'll have to leave it there for right now. We're coming back with much more from Tamara Colbert and Ari Rabin-Havt on our roundtable. Coming up, Hillary Clinton makes the rounds what she claims she's done more of than any other candidate. And for months, many have claimed the end is near for Trump. But what would happen if the GOP frontrunner did leave the race? Find out next. Returning for part two of our roundtable, communications strategist Tamara Colbert and former advisor to Senate Minority Leader Reid, Ari Rabin-Havt. Thanks for sticking around, guys. This morning on NBC's Today Show, Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton discussed controversy surrounding her emails, saying questions about her emails are beyond the pale and dubbing herself most transparent person in American history. Take a listen.
I have gone further than anybody that I'm aware of in American history. Now, that's not a long history because we haven't had emails that long, but as long as we've had them, I've gone longer and farther to try to be as transparent as possible. Nobody else has done that.
Tamara, will Hillary in control of how many emails are being released and when? Does this come off as being the most transparent person in American history?
Hillary Clinton saying that she's the most transparent person in American history is like Bill Clinton saying that he hasn't had any extramarital affairs. Please, everybody knows the truth, and for Hillary to keep denying it, it actually just makes it worse.
Ari, what do you think?
I don't know what Tamara meant by everybody knows the truth. I don't know what this universal truth is she's referring to. I do know that, a federal judge, not Hillary Clinton, is responsible for the release of her emails and has been tranching them out on a pretty regular basis at this point. So we all get to see and read the thoughts of the Secretary of State while she was Secretary of State. She certainly has gone under more scrutiny than any other person in America over the past 30 years, and I think you see the product of that.
You made a great point. The federal judge had to release her emails. She didn't release those emails. That's a great point.
It was the federal judge telling the State Department that had nothing to do with her, but okay.
We're going to move on now and talk about Donald Trump. He said he would drop out. We talked about this last week. He would drop out if his poll numbers weren't so good. Now, today, the New York Times reports Trump also said that if he were to drop out, there'd be a major collapse in the race and there'd be a major collapse of television ratings. This suggests the entertainment value Trump brings to the table is what has gotten the GOP so much attention. Tamara, does Trump have a point?
He absolutely does, but Trump is great. He hedges his bets. He circles back around, and what happens? He gets the media to cover, again, another day to help him get media coverage to boost his ratings. Look, Trump has had the longest sustained coverage of any candidate in the last two election cycles. So it's anybody's guess, and we're still early in the campaign, so it'll be interesting to see what happens.
All right, what's your reaction to Trump's response?
To be honest, if I were completely honest about it, I just don't care at this point. Like, I really, truly don't care about Donald Trump's responses. He's not going to be the GOP's nominee. I will bet numerous Mitt Romney units on that. And I
but
think
would things collapse, though, if he were to drop out of the race, would things collapse? Would people not pay as close attention? Would it be devastating at all to the GOP?
Well, if that's the case, it speaks really poorly of American politics and the GOP primary electorate, and I actually don't think I was thinking about this, and somebody asked me about this about an hour ago, and I don't actually think it would cause a great collapse. I think the campaign is about to hit its season where people are actually paying attention. I think Donald Trump is actually overestimating himself, but to be honest, I really don't care what Donald Trump has to say about his own ego.
Well, a new Wall Street Journal NBC Mirrors poll matched presidential candidates Hillary Clinton up against top Republican candidates in Iowa. Jeb Bush is ahead of Clinton by 7 points. Fiorina tops her by 8 points. But the big surprise is that Donald Trump is polling in under Hillary by 3 points. It's a small gap, but still, the GOP seems to be doing fine without Trump. Ari, do you think this is the peak? Actually, I want to ask you tomorrow. Do you think that this is the peak of Donald, or do you think there's still more to come?
I think we've got a lot more election cycle to come. And, you know, here's the thing. Any time we can get more American eyeballs watching a debate than ever before, that's a great thing. What it shows a lot of the strategists in the country is that the American people are hungry for leadership. They're even more hungry for solutions and ideas. And that's what has to happen with Donald Trump. Real solutions, real ideas for solving problems for him to continue to stay ahead in the race.
Real quickly, also making headlines this weekend, Hillary Clinton went on SNL. Let's take a quick look at that.
Donald Trump? Isn't he the one that's like, you're all losers?
Ari, was this a good move for Hillary to make?
I mean, sure, she's getting a lot of exposure. I think people generally liked it. I mean, I think candidates are doing more and more. You've seen the cavalcade of candidates, Republican and Democrat, appearing on Stephen Colbert's show. There's, you know, you can't only reach people by appearing on kind of boring news stations. You have to go and appeal to people in a pop culture sense, and I think that's what she was doing.
All right, Tamara and Ari, thank you so much for joining us here on Newsmax Now. Always good to have you.
Thanks.
And coming up next, dozens die at a Doctors Without Borders hospital. Why the United Nations says the U.S. bombing in Afghanistan may qualify as a war crime. And could tensions rise between the U.S. and Russia? Those stories plus your viewer comments just ahead when Newsmax Now continues.